What's going on, y'all? I'm Czar, and in this video I want to show you a new EQ from Mixland called Tilt. So this is a tilt EQ, obviously, as well as a two-band shelving EQ. Now we've seen tilt or seesaw EQs before, but this has some unique features about it. The first one is that it is modeled after a passive EQ, which is one of my favorite type of EQs, just because of how smooth the high end is on them. And we also have a tube saturation output stage here, which is this fader here labeled grit in the middle. So depending on how you use this, it can be a tilt EQ, it can be a shelving EQ. And looking at the low and high frequencies here, low frequency we've got 20 hertz, 60 hertz, 100 hertz, and 200 hertz. Very similar to what you'd see on like a Pultec. On the high end we have 1K, 8K, 16K, and up to 40K. So if we were using this as just a shelving EQ, we can turn up well, it's linked. Let's unlink it. We can boost or cut on the high shelf and do the same on the low shelf. So that's just using it as a shelving EQ. Once we engage this link, now the low and high will be inverted. So if we boost the low, we're going to cut the high. And if we cut the low, we're going to boost the high. And this graphic here kind of helps you let you know what you're more heavily leaning on, the highs or the lows. And then as well, you can adjust those shelving frequencies here as well to further tune what you're EQing here. All right, so let's take a listen to how this sounds. I've got a vocal and a cajon recorded here. And the cajon is in the vocal track, which is the top track, which is what we have tilt on. So let's set this back to default. And yeah, I'm going to hit play and let's turn some knobs and EQ this.
They said a righteous man will never be forsaken. Tell me, what do you do when death comes your way? When the sun goes down, when it gets a little darker, when the day is done, night gets a little harder when you're all worn out, but you're just getting started. Will you keep the faith? Will you carry on? Will you persevere?
All right, so we've lowered some of that 200 hertz, or I want to call it rolling off with the tilt EQ. We've slanted it off, I guess you can say, but it took down some of those 200 hertz, those low mids, boosted some 8K. We definitely heard it get brighter. Very smooth sounding so far. What I'm going to do, I'm going to run this back and let's unlink it and let's see what this 40K sounds like.
They said a righteous man will never be forsaken. Tell me, what do you do when death comes your way? When the sun goes down, when it gets a little darker, when the day is done, night gets a little harder when you're all worn out.
All right, that 40K sounds smooth. It's not sounding overly bright or too much, and you see I've got it cranked all the way. I'm not sure what dB gain this goes to here, but that's all the way at 40K, and it's sounding nice. Now let's mess with the grit here. So we're going to add some tube saturation to the output here.
They said a righteous man will never be. When the sun goes down, when it gets a little darker, when the day is done, night gets a little harder when you're all worn out, but you're just getting started. Will you keep the faith? Will you carry on? Will you persevere? When the sun goes down, when the sun goes down, when it gets a little darker, when the day is done, night gets a little harder when you're all worn out.
Okay, so that grit is definitely moving the vocal forward, and you can actually, well, at least on this vocal, I can drive it further than what I expected to. I really figured to start hearing some distortion maybe halfway up, but I got pretty close to the top here before we started to distort. But that tube saturation on the output stage there is definitely moving the vocal forward, and I'm liking that. Lastly, we took a look at the high. Let's look at adding some lows here just as a shelf. See if we can make this a little warmer.
When the sun goes down, when it gets a little darker, when the day is done, night gets a little harder when you're all worn out, but you're just getting started. Will you keep the faith? Will you carry on? Will you persevere when the sun goes down?
All right, so I'm liking that low frequency there as well too. So yeah, let's give some final thoughts here. So as far as the low frequency, high frequency, I don't know, that 20 hertz on the low frequency, even on a Pultec, I've never used that 20 hertz. And if you have, definitely comment and let me know what you're using it for. But I don't know. I don't know how usable that 20 hertz is. I would have rather started at 60 maybe, and then maybe had maybe a 3 or 350 on the highest that you can go on the low end maybe. But outside of the 20 hertz, that 60 hertz, 100 hertz, 200 hertz, pretty much go-to and usable frequencies for me when I'm reaching for an EQ, especially a Pultec style passive EQ on the low frequencies. High frequencies, I kind of would have wanted to see a 12K, but I'm not mad at the 8 and 16, the 1K. The 40K sound is surprisingly, like I said, it didn't sound harsh even with it all the way up. So that was definitely impressive. I definitely like the graphic when you link them, showing you, where you're leaning towards. That's an interesting touch there. And the tube output saturation definitely sounds nice. So overall, I am a fan of this plugin. And I also want to point out, if you didn't notice, the further you drive this grit, these tubes light up here, which is a nice UI touch here as well. All right, but yeah, overall, I am a fan of this. It's only $29.99, and of course, I'll have a link in the description if you want to check it out. If you like this video, I appreciate a thumbs up. If you want to continue to see content from me, then you know what to do. All right, any questions, comments, let me know, and I'll catch y'all next time. If you're interested in having me mix your song and my mastering engineer D. Lyles master it, check my link tree in this video description. From there, you can email me, you can visit my website, and check out mixes that I've done.